So welcome everybody. My name's Jodie. I lead our communities and local energy programme at Regen. It's so nice to see so many of you on this call, particularly as it's a sunny afternoon, and I'm sure many of you'd like to be out in your gardens enjoying it or walking around. This session is part of a series of work that we have been doing in partnership with Northern Powergrid for well over a year now. It started with us helping write the engagement strategy for how Northern Powergrid are going to work with communities in the next 3 years. And as part of that, we have been delivering community and local energy forums with Northern Powergrid for well over a year now. And at those forums, some of you on this call probably suggested that it would be really useful to have practical training sessions on two things. One was, what can I do if I live in a rural area? How can I get my community to participate in the energy transition? How can I help my community get to net zero? And the other one, which is coming up in about a month's time, is an energy efficiency and fuel poverty training session. So for this one, we have partnered up, of course, with Northern Powergrid and with the 2 regional energy hubs in Northern Powergrid's area. And we've done that because those regional energy hubs are responsible for the Rural Community Energy Fund grants. And those are the main ways that communities like yourselves across the country have developed local energy projects in their villages and towns. This is very much aimed to be a massively practical session. We're going to try and bring to you the examples and lessons from existing and advanced community energy groups up and down the country. So our agenda today includes presentations from Kate Royston down in the Tamar Valley, who has been doing community energy projects for well over 10 years. And we were also going to hear from Alan and Jack from the regional energy hubs about the projects that are being funded and are working now, because there are some important points about those projects and the lessons that we can learn from them. Many of them were done and underpinned in an environment where there was a subsidy to develop renewable energy projects, and that subsidy is no longer available. So that in some senses makes it harder for us, but we're going to run through some of the projects and some of the lessons and the learning that could help you as perhaps newer and earlier in your journeys to net zero, to help you think about what you might like to focus on. This session is very much open space and open source. So we've got a few presentations and then we've got 2 breakout sessions. And those are about you getting what you need from this session. We've got the right people in the room and the right expertise to answer the questions that you have. But those are informal, informative discussions. So if you have a question to ask, it's on you to ask it and get what you need from the expertise in that breakout virtual room. So please take that responsibility seriously. If you've got a question and you haven't answered it at the end of the day, that's on you. So ask those questions. And if you can't get a word in edgeways, use the chat. But yeah, we're very much going to try and focus on these kind of practical steps. As I said, we're going to bring you that experience from the community energy sector. And of course, we've got Northern Powergrid here as well to help you with any questions you might have about connecting to the network. So I think that pretty much covers it for the intro. I'm going to just check to see if Anda would like to add anything here, or Helen from Northern Powergrid.
Thank you, Jodie. I'd probably like to introduce myself. So my name is Anda. For those of you who haven't met, I'm the community energy lead for Northern Powergrid. Further to this session, which I hope everyone finds really useful, we also have some resources available on our website, which we're continuously adding to. And we recently added a new FAQ sheet there as well, so have a look. And from that, from community energy page, you can also find the contact details for getting in touch with us if you have a question that you might think of tomorrow or in a couple of days' time, or even later on when you want to get in touch with us.
Thanks, Anda. Helen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Very briefly. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Helen Priestley. I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Manager at Northern Powergrid. I am absolutely delighted to see so many of you. This was a grain of an idea put forward in a discussion a bit like today, and we've acted on it. And so the big message for today is during discussions, if there are other areas where you think, gosh, that would be brilliant if an organisation like Northern Powergrid could bring together the right people to help to have a really good conversation in order to stimulate or support community energy endeavours across the region, we want to hear about it. So I'll put my details in the chat. Please email, raise it, and we will consider it, because actions lead to great things. So I'm sure there's going to be a great discussion, lots of insight and sharing today. So thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Gavin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I can do. I don't think I can match Helen's inspirational pitch, but my name is Gavin Sangiovanni. I am the stakeholder advisor at Northern Powergrid. So I sit behind the scenes a little bit, and I've been supporting Helen and everybody else to make sure that our engagement approach is really impactful and meaningful, and that the things that you feed to us make an actual difference and a change in the way that we work, and to all of your benefit. So really glad to see everybody here.
Thanks, Gavin. And then I'm going to go to the regional energy hubs who've partnered with us on this event. So Jack.
Hello everyone, so I'm Jack Hayo, I'm part of the Midlands Energy Hub. So my job title is Principal Officer, and I primarily cover the greater Lincolnshire area, which Northern Powergrid covers part of as well. Just want to echo what everybody said. It's fantastic to see so many people here, so many people showing an enthusiasm for community energy, and really excited to have a good session with everybody.
Thanks, Jack. Alan? You're on mute, Alan.
There we go. Somebody had to do it, didn't they? Might as well get in there early. So, hi everybody. I'm Alan Miller from the North Eastern Yorkshire Energy Hub. We're hosted by Tees Valley Combined Authority, hence the name in my box there, but from the North East Yorkshire Energy Hub. My role is Programme Manager for the Energy Hub, and I also deal with the Rural Community Energy Fund for the Yorkshire area. My colleague Josh Sawyer covers that role in the North East. And yeah, and again, terrific to see everybody. Lots of familiar names and lots of new names on the delegate list, which is lovely to see.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And then let's go to the Regen team. So Hannah.
I'm going to put my camera on. Hello, everybody. So I'm the events manager at Regen. So I'm working behind the scenes with a couple of my colleagues to make sure that everything is running smoothly. So everybody behave yourself, otherwise I'll put you on mute.
Hannah has the power. She's in control. Kai.
Thanks, Jodie. Hi, everyone. I'm Kai Hoare. I work with Jodie and the communities team here at Regen. As Jodie mentioned, we've been running these similar sessions with Northern Powergrid for quite a while now, but it's yeah, it's great to see so many new faces here, and yeah, looking forward to some of the discussions in the breakout sessions later.
And Prina.
Yeah, I work with Jodie and Kai at Regen in the communities team, and I'll be hopefully seeing a few of you later in the engagement breakout session.
And Mark.
Hi, there you go, found the buttons. Hi everyone, I'm Mark Howard. I'm a project manager at Regen. I tend to be involved in most of our heat work, so I'm here for the heat breakout session.
Thanks. Okay, and let's have a quick look at the agenda, if we might, on the holding slides. That's our kind of welcome introductions complete. We're then going to move on to what might be viable in rural communities now, and this is using that experience that we've built up over the last nearly 10 years of working and supporting communities to do energy projects. Then we're going to hear from Kate Royston about the Tamar energy community work that she does. She's been involved in pretty much every aspect of community energy during that, like probably more than 10 years. I'm going to have a little tea break to give you a rest, but you're welcome to stay and chit chat if you want to during that time. It's difficult on these forums to get the sort of networking we would get at face-to-face events, but hopefully that will be possible one day soon. And then we're going to hear from Alan and Jack about those lessons from the local energy hub, and we'll go straight into the breakouts, and there's plenty of time in those breakouts for you to get what you need out of these sessions. So as I said before, please do make absolutely the most use out of those that you can, and make sure you ask the questions that you need to, and get the wealth of expertise in the room, not just from the people who've just introduced themselves, but from each other as well. I've noticed there's quite a lot of people on this call. You know, it's very much aimed at people who are new to this, and something that you're starting out in a journey towards net zero and thinking about how you can help your community decarbonise. But there's lots of communities in this group who've been working on this for a long time and have lots of experience to add as well. So we're going to try and draw all of that together. We are obviously recording this session. You've all agreed to that when you signed up to it, and that's so it can go online, and everyone else who couldn't make it here today can have a look at it and make use of the knowledge that we will be sharing. And then at the end, we will be asking for feedback. That feedback is the most important thing for us to be able to plan what happens next. So as Helen said, you know, if you've got ideas about what you need support with, Northern Powergrid have really committed to community energy in a way that has really demonstrated they really care about this subject. They really want to support you to do the projects you want to do. And it's only by you telling us what you need that we can make sure that support and delivery is really relevant and impactful for you. So please do share your feedback at the end. We'll be wrapping up at 4:30. Okay, we're going to move on now to what projects might be viable in rural communities. I had a brilliant idea 5 minutes before this session to colour code these, and I really should have done this, but I'm going to try and do that on the hoof as we go through. So next slide, please. So I want to start by thinking about what we're actually trying to achieve here. Most of the communities that I speak to up and down the country are really trying to address climate change and do something practical about climate change. But they're also interested in addressing fuel poverty and in the economic benefits that can deliver that circular economic effect and unconstrained revenue that can be spent on social and environmental projects. So communities are very good at solving their own problems. You live where you live, you know what the problems are, and you probably have the best solutions for how to fix those challenges and problems. But quite often it's very difficult to pay for those. And that's why I moved out of general community development work into community energy specifically, because about 10 years ago, communities were installing energy generation projects, earning money from that and spending it on addressing things like fuel poverty or paying for community assets. That was not easy then, but it was supported by the feed-in tariff, which no longer exists. And that makes it a little bit more difficult for communities now to do something practical about achieving net zero. But there are still things that you can do, and so I'm going to try and focus on those today. But I want you to hold on to this concept that really it's about you owning and controlling assets in your own communities, because by doing that, you can achieve more of the benefits and the outcomes that you want to achieve. Next slide, please. The second thing I'm going to say before we get into what's possible is focusing on the impact. CSE and BEIS have just released a new tool for doing this, and this is me typing in a parish called Raymondby right in the middle of Northern Powergrid's area to look at what the housing, transport, industrial, commercial, agricultural impacts on carbon emissions are from those sectors. And you can see here the red part of this circle is housing. And so I know that many of you have said you've joined this call because you want to talk about electricity generation and renewables. We're going to think about renewable heat first, because housing is probably one of the biggest areas that we could have an impact in our own communities. And really this is about making sure that what we're doing is actually going to achieve the impact and the outcomes that we want to see. So you will be sent all these slides afterwards, and the link there is for that tool. It's a really useful tool if you want to be data driven. The other thing to say is that planning what you're going to do is really important. So there are lots of tools online about planning how to get your community to net zero, and there's more and more tools that we see every day for that kind of thing. Next slide, please. So heat first. It's not easy to decarbonise our housing stock. You know, we have a nation full of cold and leaky and damp homes. But most of the communities that I've worked with have taken a fabric first approach. And I've put some examples here for Carbon Co-op and Brighton and Hove Community Energy Services, who've done deep retrofit of their local housing stock. It has to be said that most of that has been underpinned by grant funding, and it's difficult to find the funding to do that. But you know, because this takes up such a big part of our energy consumption at a domestic level, and because it's such a big part of our carbon emissions, we really do need to think about that housing stock and what we can do about it. And particularly in rural areas, in off-gas grid areas, that's harder. So the current thinking is really around air and ground source heat pumps, anaerobic digestion, which Jack's going to talk a bit more about later, biomass, biogas, biomethane. And there are a couple of examples here of communities thinking about this on a whole village scale. Thurle and Swarthmore Prior, those links are there, so you can look those up if this is something you're interested in. But ultimately, that's kind of like I would say an orange to a red type of a project. It's quite difficult to do. Building new homes that are net zero ready is an obvious area for decarbonisation. You know, we've had challenges with our government not regulating to make sure that all new homes are net zero, but we've seen quite a few communities taking it on themselves up and down the country to develop their own housing projects which are net zero. And there's a couple of examples there in Transition Homes and Plymouth Energy Community that you can look at. Okay, next slide, please. This infographic is from the 5th Carbon Budget from the Committee on Climate Change, and it's really about showing you how the Committee on Climate Change, who inform government through the carbon budgets, what needs to happen. And if you look at that rural section there, it's really around off-gas grid, heat pumps, anaerobic digestion. And the other thing to say here is that they have really identified that energy efficiency and simple measures of energy efficiency are quite an impactful way to reduce our emissions in our domestic housing stock. Next slide, please. So this is a green type of project. This is the sort of project that happens very regularly up and down the country with established community energy organisations who have become qualified. They've trained themselves to be able to give home energy advice. That's to go into people's homes and run energy fairs and talk to people and train people and engage and inform and educate people on how they can use that energy in their households more efficiently, more effectively, and reduce carbon emissions as a result. So those simple measures can be things like draft proofing, switching your energy supplier, increasing your loft insulation. And I'm not going to dwell too much on this because we have a whole training session on this on the 20th of May. So if you're not signed up for that already, then please do. And that training session, it will be with Groundwork, who are out there delivering this kind of work all the time. Important to say here as well that energy efficiency and fuel poverty quite often get lumped together. They're very different. And sometimes we're asking people who are in fuel poverty to actually use more energy because we don't want them to be cold and suffering from the health impacts of living in cold, damp homes. So actually there is a need for some people to be increasing their energy use. But for most of us, it's those kind of, we can do a lot by those simple measures, and those programmes are happening with lots of communities up and down the country delivering this kind of work, and it's very impactful. Next slide, please. So we're going to move on to electricity, and I'm going to start with the cheapest form of renewable energy generation we have, which is wind turbines. It's really difficult to get a wind turbine installed onshore now. The government have been very supportive of offshore wind. Most of our offshore wind projects are owned by foreign companies, and the benefit then from an economic perspective isn't necessarily as local as we might like. And this is about ownership and control again. You know, wind in the past was perceived to be very unpopular, but actually our government produce figures every year on popularity of different technologies, and And about 80% of people consistently say they support onshore wind or would support onshore wind in their own backyard. So it's a bit of a myth that I want to bust about people not thinking this is popular, but it's really challenging from a planning perspective to get it through. And the reason I've started with it is because it's the most effective project from an economic perspective to deliver the most amount of impact. So the amount of electrons you'll produce will be more, and for the cost that you'll put in. The other thing to say about wind is that, you know, if we don't do it as communities and this market opens up again, it will be done commercially on our doorsteps, and it's better that we own it and control it because we get more of the benefit that way, and that's in terms of local jobs and the community benefit funds that these projects can deliver. So this graphic is a comparison between two Welsh projects. You know, one of them is a privately owned 228 megawatt wind farm. One of them is a two turbines, 4.7 megawatts, community owned. And the size of the benefit funds are 150k for the commercial project and £638,000 per megawatt for the community project. So quite substantial differences in economic return to that community. And the jobs created are greater as well. So let's move on to the next slide. The next type of technology that has been the most common in community energy terms has been solar PV, and that's both roof mounted and ground mounted. I want to talk really about the importance of upscaling here, and I'm going to tell you a little story about communities in Devon who I've been working with this network for almost 10 years. We started off doing training just like this to train ourselves on what we needed to do to deliver projects. We've got more community energy groups in the county than anywhere else in the country. And we started off with there's 23 groups, and they all wanted to do their own projects and put solar panels on village halls, on community buildings and educational buildings. And they did that, and it was really hard. And then the feed-in tariff was cut and it became harder. But what they have done now is they've clubbed together and they set up a new organisation, which is a sort of umbrella organisation that supports all of those smaller organisations, but is there to deliver projects at significant scale. So we've got a pipeline of 100 megawatts of solar, which is ground mounted solar, and a pipeline of 70 megawatts of wind turbines. And we're doing that because the economy of scale, the economic benefit we can deliver to our communities by collaborating is much, much greater. And that has come about through collaborating with local authorities and collaborating with the distribution network operators in our region. And that collaboration has been absolutely essential to finding business models that are going to make these projects work. This project, you know, serious scale, serious impact, not just from a kind of megawatts generated of green, clean energy, but also pounds back into the local community. Next slide, please. Electricity, hydro. So this is a little health warning. This is definitely a red project. You know, most of the big projects that could generate income have already been done in this country, and what's left is going to be so challenging from an economic perspective that I wouldn't recommend any new group now starting out to explore hydro as an option. I just have seen so many groups try and essentially fail to get hydro projects off the ground. Most of them that are left, most of the projects that are left are in environmentally sensitive environments. Rivers are very social places. That makes them very contentious. There's lots of different user groups like the fishing lobby. You have to do huge amounts of environmental impact assessment work, surveys, studies to make sure your project is a success. And the licensing is a traumatic experience. It's contentious, it carries reputational risk, and it needs lots of ongoing management. So, you know, you'd have to be a really ambitious community to want to do a hydro project these days. And you'd need a serious amount of grit, determination, and skill on your board to make it happen. Okay, let's move on. Not going to dwell too much on transport, because when you registered for these events, there were very few of you who were interested in transport. But those are just a couple of examples of communities doing transport projects with EVs and e-scooters. So you heard about those on our recent Northern Powergrid event if you joined that, and you can watch it again if you didn't. So I'm not going to dwell too much on those. We can move on. Innovation. So this is a kind of orange to red type of a project. It's really for groups who are very interested in the technical detail of how our energy system works. And there are a few communities who do innovation projects, but they tend to be the most advanced, with very kind of a deep interest in the sort of geeky nature of energy. The funding comes generally from EU funding or government funding, the Network Innovation Allowance and Competition. The last round of this funded £90 million worth of projects. It can be very good if you're thinking about things like local supply and peer-to-peer trading, which are very popular concepts, but not really possible from a regulatory point of view in our country, because our market is heavily regulated to essentially to protect consumers and the cost. So we all pay for our network and we all benefit from being connected to it. And if anyone has to pay disproportionately or unfairly for that network, it becomes a problem with that regulator. So if you want to talk about innovation, it's an area that I'm really passionate about and happy to talk to anyone who's got ideas about this more, or you can talk to Northern Powergrid. Okay, let's move forward. So engagement and education are probably, these are totally green areas again. So these are things that are so important. If we're going to get to net zero, we have to bring communities with us. If we try and impose a top-down energy transition on people, we're going to get resistance. And one of the unique things about all of you on this call today, and the thing that you bring to the table, is that you are place-based, you live where you live, you know your friends and neighbours, and you have the power to influence and inform and help bring them along on this journey. Because, you know, with the best will in the world, climate change is not going to be everyone's top priority. And doing something about it at a collective level is beyond what most people want to do. So you already are early adopters in the sense that you're trying to do something about this on a collective level. But that relies on really getting people involved, talking to people about this, going into schools, talking to school children about this. There's a really great project called Energy Heroes that Northern Powergrid have been funding for many, many years, which is a school curriculum programme in the area. And yeah, I think that kind of education, information, engagement part is one of the most important things that we can do as activists in our own communities. Next slide, please. So these are my kind of top tips from, as I say, nearly 10 years of working with and supporting communities. Be ambitious, think big. You know, speed and scale are going to be absolutely essential if we're going to get to net zero by 2050 or any earlier. Use the data to deliver the most impactful actions. You know, I know that a lot of you will want to be thinking about starting small and putting solar panels on some community buildings, but the licensing and leasing and legal implications of that are so onerous that you could do a much bigger project with a ground-mounted solar and achieve much bigger impact in terms of financial and societal benefit. So really think about that impact that you're trying to achieve. The engagement, as I just talked about, is absolutely fundamental. You know, these are only community projects if people are involved. So help people participate, help people learn, get funding for your time. The most successful groups, the ones that I've highlighted in this talk, have all had paid members of staff to deliver these projects. There's lots and lots of voluntary hours that go in as well. But most of them have paid members of staff because these are serious projects, they're technical, they're detailed, and you get a lot of kind of volunteer burnout if you don't have that resource. And the Rural Community Energy Fund will pay for your time if you put in time for project management. Governance is really important. Who is in control of these projects, and what are their motives, and why are they trying to do it? Most community organisations are registered as community benefit societies, and they have asset locks, which means that the assets that they own are retained for community value, even if that organisation fails and collapses. You can do something about energy efficiency and fuel poverty right now. So if you don't want to be ambitious about this, you don't want to do big generation projects, keep it simple. And most importantly, have fun. You know, if you're not going to have fun with this, no one else is going to want to join you. So have fun, make it look really exciting, because then everyone else will want to join you. Next slide, please. This is a poem that was inspired by our poet in residence, Matt Harvey, and it's a partially submerged man in a community that's been flooded, and he wants to go renewable, so his streets are less canoeable. And I really want to bring that to you as a little bit of joy at the end. You know, it's a kind of funny take on where we are now and where we could be if we work together as communities to do something about this in a proactive way rather than a reactive way like this guy. Thank you very much. How are we doing on time? Yeah, I am 1 minute over, so I'm going to stop wittering on there. I'm going to hand straight over to Kate. Please carry on, continue posting questions in the chat, and I'll try and answer those as Kate is talking. Kate Royston is a real community energy champion. She's been working on all sorts of community energy projects, not just in Devon, but across the Southwest for many, many years, and has done some of the most inspiring and challenging projects that I've seen communities achieve. So she's going to bring to you some of the lessons and some of her top tips on what she would do if she was starting out now. So some of the lessons that she's learnt and what she would advise you to do next. Kate, over to you.
Hi everybody, and welcome on April the 22nd, which is Earth Day. So a very good day for holding this event today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who and where we are, our journey so far, some of our aspirations and some key tips. And I'll try and talk about key tips as we talk through the journey. Next slide, please. So I'm based in the Tamar Valley, which straddles Devon and Cornwall. And so, yes, so down in the country, it's down here in the kind of foot, and you can see Tavistock, which I'm where I am just here. And I'm from Tamar Energy Community, as Jodie mentioned. And within Devon, as Jodie also mentioned, we have a very strong network, the Devon Community Energy Network and Devon Energy Collective, which is bringing a number of us together to develop larger scale projects. And we also have an organisation called Cozy Devon, which brings together the local authorities with some of the community energy groups who are delivering energy advice services, particularly to those more vulnerable people within the community. That brings us all together. Next slide, please. Right, this is rather a busy slide, and I was trying to think about how I could describe what we were doing. So in the end, I've put it all together like this, and we'll see how we get on. And depending upon the feedback, I could perhaps put some things together that make it a little bit more understandable. But starting with Transition Tavistock. So Tamar Energy Community started as Transition Tavistock, so one of the many transition groups across the area. And we had been doing quite a lot of work around energy and decided in 2014 to set up Tamar Energy Community as a community benefit society. So we're a kind of transition spin-off, if you like. And then going down the collaboration learning. So collaboration and learning is really a critical part of your journey as a community energy organisation, or an organisation who aspires to do things in community energy. So we were very fortunate in Devon. We were invited by local authorities to form the South West Devon Community Energy Partnership, which brought a lot of our groups together when we were in the fledgling state, and that gave us some funding and opportunities to work together. So we were able to grow together. And we would really recommend that you reach out to people around you and remember to network and collaborate. And the other important thing around learning is the only things you don't learn, you don't know, are the things you haven't yet learned or found out about. So it's important not to let things you don't know put you off, because it's just a question of finding out about them. In 2018, the South West Devon Community Energy Partnership became Devon Community Energy Network. I mean, it was in effect embracing all of Devon. And then in 2019, a number of the community energy groups got together and formed the Devon Energy Collective, which is a CIC, which is doing large-scale community projects. Energy advice services. So looking at the stream down, energy advice services is where we started, where many people start. And it kind of started from many of us trying to work on our own projects and being frustrated by not being able to find the information or contractors or whatever. So just getting together to work on things together. And we were developing advice on a volunteer basis, running energy fairs, open homes and that sort of thing. And then from 2016, it became much more professional what we were doing. And that's what we market under our Warm and Well. And we deliver energy advice under LEAP, and a part of the Cozy Devon board, which, as I mentioned, brings together the community energy groups with the local authorities across the area. And then, well, really from 2013, we've all been trying to solve the problem about how to scale up able to pay retrofit across Devon, and it's now been progressed under the banner of Retrofit in Devon. And we're hoping that through 2021 we make a real impact there and start to look to see how we can deliver the much needed retrofit at scale. So that's the advice services. Renewable generation is where people got very much more excited. And so through the South West Devon Community Energy Partnership and working together with Devon County Council and Regen, we got support in understanding how to scope opportunities for renewable energy, and we did a lot of scoping around rooftop solar using Google Earth and that sort of thing. Remembering at this time that the FIT tariff was available, which was important. And then government came along and gave an opportunity to pre-register roofs, although I think we'd probably already started our Rsf feasibility at that time. I'm not sure about timelines exactly. But this was our first Rsf project, our community solar project. And I have to say that the Rsf funding is absolutely invaluable. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute with some top tips from a community energy group perspective. So in the end, by the end of mid-2017, we had 6 rooftop solar installations that were community owned, and one of them, which we're particularly proud of, is on a Tesco supermarket, and we were the first community group to be able to work with Tesco's. So that was quite a thing to do, but we were very, very pleased with it. And actually Tesco were a model of an organisation being polite and courteous in working with us. We raised a community share offer, which finally finished in November last year, 2020. And actually we managed to raise £322,000 in about a week probably altogether. I mean, it went very quickly. And we recommend this as a way to raise money, but it shouldn't be taken lightly. It's quite a lot of work. But again, there are a lot of people that can help you with that. And we were able to secure a grant from Reach to help us with that. In 2021, we added another 100 kilowatts of rooftop solar, and actually that went live on the 29th of March. So we're delighted about that. It's generating well. And then probably our most ambitious project to date is the Renewable Heat Network project that we've been running. So this is looking at the opportunities for renewable heat across an independent school estate, which has 2 campuses. And again, this is being funded by Rsf. And at the moment, we're working very hard to finish the report whilst being chased by our energy hub. Heat, as Jodie mentioned, is something that's really important to do, but it's also very challenging. And we're now in a situation where we're in a kind of bit of a void because government has essentially removed the non-domestic RHI and various other incentives around heat, and nobody's quite sure what's going to come up. So again, that shouldn't stop people doing feasibility studies, waiting for government schemes to come along. It's always kind of good if you have the funding and the ability to have a number of shelf-ready projects that can go when the conditions are right for those. Jodie mentioned innovation. So we've been fortunate enough to be involved in an innovation project, which was called Open LV. So Open standing for Open Data and LV, low voltage substation. And so that project has been about community groups being given access to the data from a substation that we're then able to share with our community. So it enables us to share with all the households on a particular substation what their energy profile looks like. And it can help encourage people to understand the importance of time shifting some of their work, their energy usage from the kind of peak between 4 and 8 in the evening to other times of day, or reducing it altogether, or thinking about using slow cookers or whatever to stop everybody switching on their power between 4 and 8. And that can lead to all sorts of other things. Currently, we haven't done anything more with that, but we would like to in the future. And engagement is important. In fact, it's essential, and it's something that's really an ongoing feature and which kind of grows over time, I think. We also have, as Devon Energy, we also have an Rsf Feasibility Project, which has just been submitted, and that is for the Clayworks wind farm. So that's an ambitious project, which would be difficult for an individual community group to do on its own, but because a number of us have come together under a banner, as Jodie suggested, it makes it much easier to work together on that. In terms of Rsf, what I wanted to say about that is that really, as I mentioned, it's an invaluable source of funding. It's a study which really helps you understand the opportunities to move forward with a project, and it provides access to professional expertise. It means that you can really learn, and our advice on this would be to make sure that you work closely with the consultants that you bring on board and don't just leave it to them. This is really an opportunity for you to get to grips with whatever topic it is and understand it, because at the end of the day, it'll be you that has to deliver the project. The consultant recruitment is critical, and it's important to get help with that. Then the hubs may be able to help you, but also talk to other groups, or there may be opportunities to talk to Regen or Community Energy England. And you need to, from our perspective, we recommend making sure that you include some of the funding for project management for your own time. because otherwise, as Jodie said, you can end up burnt out and people having to spend too much voluntary time. After all, this is all about us moving forwards and developing thriving social enterprises and developing sustainable livelihoods for people. And you can't do that if you're working for nothing all the time. The technical bit is important, but you must make sure that you have very good consultant support for the financial and business modelling, because that part is absolutely critical. And if you are uncertain as to the sort of organisations that can help you with that, then I'm sure the Energy Hub would help you, or you can speak to Regen or come and talk to somebody like ourselves. Next slide, please. So our aspirations. One of the things I've noted actually while we've been talking about this is a key aspiration should probably be putting in place a strategic pathway to net zero, because whilst we did a lot of work about this early on, you get involved in projects and trying to move things forward, and you know, Jodie asked me to think about what we would have done differently. Well, to some extent it's difficult to answer that, because each community will be different, each community will have its own circumstances. It's also based on chance and fortune and circumstances that arise. So I think each community has to really find its own pathway. We're really keen to make sure we progress retrofit in Devon to get a scale to be able to pay retrofit service, to be able to take a more strategic approach to fuel poverty and poor quality housing, because at the moment a lot of what we do is very reactive, based on referrals that we get. We're very fortunate we've just managed to secure some funding from the Redress Fund for a 2-year project looking at establishing village partnerships. We're interested to see how that works. Community-owned housing, I think, is really important for the future, and Jodie mentioned 2 examples. I've also mentioned provided here a link to South Dartmoor Community Energy, which is one of our sister organisations. Scaling up renewable generation of power and heat, so we can do some of that through Devon Energy and looking at our own opportunities. And importantly, looking at how that can be linked to local balancing and tariffs, and the development of smart systems. I mean, some of this all seems like a mysterious black box at the moment, and Jodie knows far more about this than me. We've tried to understand it, but it's still quite difficult. But the other thing that's important here, and what I didn't mention about our heat project, is really the development of energy services companies. So one thing that will help us move forward and become much more sustainable organisations is if we actually start delivering services on an ongoing basis to organisations. Travel and transport is challenging, but there are options around this. And importantly, improved and positive messaging around behaviour and energy use. Next slide, please. And then I'm nearly done. Sorry, I'm probably running over a bit. As I mentioned at the beginning, the only things you don't know are what you don't know yet. And that has to be the most important advice for anybody trying to work in this field. Together with be assertive, act professionally, and persistence pays is also an important motto. Cooperate and collaborate, and make sure that you're developing local networks and alliances across your area. Again, this is something that that Regen and Northern Powergrid may well be able to help you with, and your energy hubs. Our advice, and something that we should perhaps have tried a bit harder on, is endeavouring to work in partnership with your local authority. So at the end of the day, the community energy groups are the people who are there at the coalface, working with people on the ground, and we're viewed as trusted, independent agents by our residents. But the local authority also has credibility, and it often has funding, and and it has commitments for improving housing and all the planning stuff, etc. So if we can find ways of encouraging the local authorities to actually collaborate with us in partnership, then that would take us a long way forward. Jodie mentioned governance, and I would agree with that, and try and have a strong and broad board. You'll probably still end up with one or two people like myself who are the pioneers and the people that are left holding the ball. But succession is something that's important to try and get in place. And, you know, lastly, just go do it. We don't have much time, and as Jodie said, have fun. Next slide, please. So that's all I wanted to say. Just thanks for listening and enjoy your journeys. And if you want to get in touch, please do, but I can't guarantee a prompt response. That's it.
Thank you, Kate. We have got a little bit of time for questions before our tea break. So I'm going to open it up now. If you can please put your cameras on, I can see you putting your hands up, or you can raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. There's a raise hand function on Zoom. There are quite a few people on this call, so there's a few pages of people for me to flick across. So if you're putting your hand up, please put it up and keep it up so that I can have time to scroll across the 3 screens and see you guys. So questions.
Or comments? Any comments?
So we've got Martha and Mike. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah,
there we go.
No, the question was really, was there an issue with Kate being across two counties and very close to the border between Devon and Cornwall, where we're an outpost of North Yorkshire, actually located on the edge of County Durham, and our natural partners are actually in North Yorkshire. I just wondered if there was a sort of funding issue, talking about linking up with the local authorities. Well, that could be a problem for us.
So one of the key reasons why we chose to be Tamar for Devon and Cornwall was because a lot of our volunteer base under Transition Tavistock came from both sides of the border, and we felt that in order to be inclusive, it was important to cover both sides. And we thought that that may increase our opportunities. So if there was funding available on one side or the other side, we could take advantage of it. As it turns out, because we've all worked so closely in Devon, we tend to be a little bit more Devon focused than Cornwall focused, although some of our installations, including our Tesco one, are in Cornwall. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a question of trying to make it work.
That opportunity point's a really good one, Kate, as well, because for you guys, there is a revolving loan fund that's starting in County Durham. And so, you know, there's an opportunity there for you to expand your remit and your reach to take advantage of that opportunity. Great question. Any other questions? Mike Sparrow.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
And thank you very much, Kate, for your presentation. It's inspirational to hear what someone's trying to do on a bigger scale. I'm representing the Richmondshire Climate Action Partnership. I'm very interested in domestic heating as a problem. As you said earlier, it represents a substantial part of our carbon footprint as a district. I'm just wondering, I wasn't quite clear from Kate's presentation whether you've had some successful scale projects for dealing with domestic heating, and if so, whether there's a sort of picture of what the economics of that looks like that we could plug into and learn from.
So our heating experience to date has been much more from an advice perspective. So in our fuel poverty work, then we help people get upgrades to their heating through EcoFlex and other forms of funding. And we do, I mean, we work closely with a number of installers that we feel are likely to do a good job. So if people come and want to talk to us about air source heat pumps or other forms of heat technology, then we give them our best possible advice, but then recommend that they talk to professional installers, you know, at least until we're more fully trained up as retrofit coordinators. It's important not to give people advice beyond that which you are capable of. There are other organisations such as BESCO, I believe, that are doing much more about owning some of those assets themselves. I'm not so familiar with that, and I think that the heat session following this will go into this in a bit more detail.
It will, and just to highlight again those two examples in the slides that I put up, there's links in there to Carbon Co-op, which is deep whole house retrofit. They have installed low carbon heat technologies as well and talked a lot publicly about how they do that and shared that information very much on a kind of there's also the pay as you save model that Brighton and Hove Community Energy Services Company are using, where they're installing domestic heat, low carbon heat technologies and recouping the money that it's cost to install them over the lifetime bill savings that they're achieving. But they're doing that as part of a package of retrofit. So they will think of that fabric first approach and then think about how can we change the heating away from oil or whatever it is. Mark, do you want to pick up on that point at all whilst we're all on the call?
I probably don't have anything to add at that stage without ending up going into great depth. So,
okay. Well, there's one to plug for if you want to join our session on domestic heat. Mark is our expert in this area. He's written our paper on low carbon heat and basically has all of the answers for you pretty much. So
thanks, Jodie.
No pressure, Mark.
There's a question in chat, Jodie, about ability to pay.
Do you want to take that one, Kate?
Yeah, so so the able to pay market is yeah, as Kai's just put up the link to people powered retrofit. So across Devon, what we are looking to implement is a form of the carbon co-op model called people powered retrofit. So over the years, we have offered able to pay advice mainly on a voluntary basis. So it's kind of new to us to be getting ourselves to the stage where we're able to offer this on a funding base. So where we're charging people for this sort of advice, but it's developing, and we hope that by the end of 2021, we'll have a model that can work, and we'll be increasingly offering this on a payment basis to local residents.
Okay, thanks, Kate. It's tea break time, so we're going to have a little break until 3:10. When we come back, we're going to hear from the regional energy hubs from Alan and Jack, and they're going to talk you through some of the projects and the patterns that they've seen, where they've seen successful projects, but also projects that haven't quite succeeded. And I always think that we can learn as much from the projects that haven't worked as the ones that have. So important to not reinvent the wheel or repeat mistakes that have been made before. So please do go and have a little break, grab a cup of tea, have a little rest from the screen time that we all seem to spend so much time looking at these days. And if you'd like to come and have a chat in the break, please feel free to do that. Please continue posting any questions in the chat or just say them out loud, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Oh, see, great. See, it's returned.
In the last couple of minutes before everyone comes back from tea break, was there anyone on here who did have any questions or wanted to have a chat?
I think mine is just about finding the funding to actually be able to deliver the recommendations that you get from the feasibility study. It's the feasibility study process is great, and getting the funding, a large amount of money in community terms to do the feasibility study, then getting the barrier of actually being able to get funding to deliver the recommendations. That's the biggest off-putter, because you've got everyone G'd up, everyone behind you,
yeah,
and then where do you go next without to actually do it? It's really hard.
Really big challenge, really good questions too, and I'm sure Alan and Jack are going to cover a lot of what's possible from a rural community energy fund perspective, because it's not just funding for feasibility, it's funding for the next stage as well.
Yeah.
So they'll talk about those grants. There's also, of course, the thing that Kate mentioned, which is community shares, and that's one of the reasons why engagement is so important. If you've got everyone really engaged, and you've got, you're not going to necessarily have a really affluent community, but there is money out there in communities, and Kate showed, her share offer is essentially selling out within a week, and that's quite a mixed community, some quite poor areas, some more affluent areas. But we've seen communities up and down the country raising millions of pounds that way, and then getting bank loans to do these projects. So I'm sure Jack and Alan will pick up on that in their talks. Yeah. Is there anyone else who had any burning questions before we make a start?
Perhaps I could add that the cost of money is so low at the moment that this is perhaps a good time to be doing projects, and there are various organisations out there who can provide advice and support. I mean, one of them is based in Cornwall, Communities for Renewables. So they're people who are very, very good at helping to advise people on best way to raise money. Again, it's not a question of, it's a question of talking to people who have done similar things to break down the barriers, because many of these are perceived barriers as opposed to real barriers.
Can I just ask a question of Kate? Presumably with your community operation, because you've been doing projects, does that mean you've had to set up like a not-for-profit organisation, a kind of project company to do what you've been doing? Because you seem to have done an awful lot of work. And owns the infrastructure that you've installed for your energy projects? And how does it get maintained? How does that all work in terms of organisation?
So it's a good question from Janet Inian about who owns it, how is it maintained. Kate, do you want to answer that?
Yes, so we're a community benefit society, so it's a form of mutual society, which is a very common form for community energy groups. And it's an organisation which is set up as a not-for-profit and has an asset lock. And the assets, so our community solar installations, are owned by Tamar Energy Community. And then through community share offers, they're owned by the shareholders. I guess it's a kind of virtual ownership. But members, so it's a one member, one vote type construction. So if you either join as a member through a pound membership or invest in shares, then you become a member, and members have the right to vote at meetings, etc. So in that way, the organisation is very democratic, and we manage the operation and maintenance of the installations ourselves with our small team. The community solar side is mainly done on a voluntary basis.
Great, thanks, Kate.
What sort of numbers are you talking about in terms of members?
Well,
what sort of numbers of people would you expect?
Well, through our share issue, our membership list is now, I think it's exactly 250 actually. 250
okay.
members.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. So if you've got any other questions, please carry on using the chat function, posting them in there. We will do our best to answer them. I'm now going to move on to Jack and Alan from the Regional Energy Hubs, who are going to share with you some of their top tips and lessons, things that they've noticed in terms of trends and lessons from groups that they have been funding. Who wants to go first, Jack or Alan?
I'm up, Jodie. It's my slide, so I guess I'm cracking on. Yeah. So no, thank you very much, and thanks Kate for that presentation as well. And lovely to see, let's say, so many people at the event today, and let's say lots of familiar names. So obviously I'm going to be talking through the Rsf programme, just talk about where we're at with that at the moment. We issued 10 funding agreements this week to groups, which has been fantastic. But that just gives you an idea of where we're at on our journey. We've had 13 feasibilities complete to date. 10 funding agreements just went out this week. So, you know, we're at a midpoint in the programme in terms of seeing outcomes. So in a way, that's quite, you know, it's not a time to draw firm conclusions, I would say, but it's a good time to take stock and look at what's worked well to date. So, yeah, if you can just move on to the next slide. Thanks, Kate. Just a very quick plug before I get going. Our website will be up and running next week, our Energy Hub website. So we now have a shiny new slide that shows our area of operation. We have not had one of these for the last 2.5 years that we've been operating. So, so this just shows the 6 LEP areas that we operate in our 31 local authorities. We'll circulate the new website widely as soon as it goes live. So yeah, if you can just move on. Okay, thank you. So from one map to another, and this shows a little bit of a bleak picture, I suppose, from our part of the world. This map comes from a study carried out by Community Energy England, which focused on community energy, particularly in Yorkshire and Humber, or I should say the lack of community energy activity in Yorkshire and Humber. Didn't focus on North East, but as you can see from this slide, it's absolutely, the findings were absolutely relevant for the North East as well. And really, this showed in a nutshell the context where we were with community energy when Rsf arrived with the energy hubs 2 years ago. There was a phrase used in the study. It talked about underdeveloped infrastructure, and I think in a nutshell, you know, that summarised the position quite nicely. We had a real lack of community energy groups who were active in the sector. You can see in the map towards the south of Yorkshire, there's a little bit more activity in the more urban areas. So Energise Barnsley, Sheffield Renewables, a couple of really strong groups down there. Apart from that, the picture really was there was a handful of groups who'd done a fantastic job in unpicking those very challenging hydro projects. But when we approached them to see if they had a desire to build on the work they'd done, there wasn't any interest in doing that. I think that the energy involved in delivering the hydro project and then managing and running the project, really that was the focus for those community groups. So they've done a fantastic job in unpicking those, but obviously in developing the community sector further in our area, you know, that wasn't going to be a particularly fruitful route, if you like. So yeah, I think that gives you a good picture of where we are and where we were and where we are, to be fair. So if you could, yeah, next slide, thanks, Kai. So given that, obviously the nervousness was we had funding to support somewhere between 30, 40 projects, 30 or 40 groups. And obviously the worry was for us, where are these groups and what are these projects? So the approach that we've taken, or we did take in the early stages, was just to advertise the fund as widely as possible to make sure as many people who had an interest in this area were aware of the fund, make sure those groups who might be interested knew about it. That was the first point. And then secondly, we took as supportive an approach as we could to try and help those groups go through that really steep learning curve that you know, Kate's touched on in terms of moving from a group with an interest to an active functioning community energy group. And I think it's just worth mentioning as well that the Energy Hub itself hasn't existed for very much longer than Rsf. So it was also a steep learning curve for ourselves. And obviously, you know, in terms of the resource and staff available at the Energy Hub, that's developed along with Rsf. And just specifically in terms of support that we offered, one thing I'd like to mention was we procured a framework partner. So we procured a consultancy that was available for any community group to engage with directly once they'd secured Rsf funding without having to go through a tender process. There was three, so that we procured with a firm called Regen, who have a fantastic track record in community energy based in Edinburgh. And three main reasons we did that. Firstly, we were concerned about gaps in consultancy provision. When I talked about that underdeveloped infrastructure, part of that underdeveloped infrastructure was a lack of consultants, also a lack of finance advice, just to go back to a point that Kate made before talking to Sue there. So there was that lack of consultancy locally. So Regen, we saw that as a way to plug that potential gap. Hello, Amy from Regen. So just a message there. And well, thanks for joining us. Secondly, there was a socio-economic consideration. We really absolutely value those experts who are willing to give their time to get involved in community energy. Those professionals, those engineers, those people with finance background, people with procurement expertise. We absolutely want to, you get support their involvement in that through Rsf. But we also didn't want to make it a closed shop. We were really conscious that some areas might not have those professionals. They might not have access to that expertise. And we hope that through procuring a framework partner, that might help smooth the path to access the funding for a whole range of different groups. And thirdly, there was a social value element to the framework partnership. And that said that the successful consultants, which we're delighted with Regen at the end of the day, would offer free advice to any community group who had an interest in the fund. So again, that was a way of us trying to plug that gap, saying, well, there's nobody local you can ask. There are no local community groups, and other community groups in other parts of the country, obviously, can be supportive and helpful, but we were very aware. We made those links in some cases, but there's a lot of demands on the time of the experts, Kate and the like, because the expertise they've got is so valuable. So those were the three reasons that we did that. Obviously, this was all done actually at a very early meeting that we had with Regen. They did mention a thing called Teams and talked about the potential for having meetings with community groups at a distance, which we weren't really convinced that would work. And obviously, 2 years later, yeah, they probably had a point. It wasn't a bad idea, and yeah, we're all fairly used to that now. But obviously, that when we set this up, we were expecting to be spending a lot of time travelling, physically going to meetings, doing all the face-to-face contacts to try and generate interest in the fund. Yeah, thanks, Kate. Next slide, thanks. So, key statistics from the fund so far: we've had 247 inquiries received to date. We have supported 31 stage 1 projects, 4 stage 2 projects. Just for those of you who don't know, stage 2 funding is available for projects that have gone through a feasibility stage and have shown that that a project looks, the viability looks really strong, and then we can give stage 2 funding in order to support the delivery of that project. So we've supported 4 stage 2 projects. The full 1.47 million earmarked to support groups has all been committed, and there at the bottom we've got just a spread of the types of projects, the types of organisations that we've supported. The one piece of information that's not here is the technologies that have been supported, or the technologies that groups have bid in against. And really that's primarily because a lot of the groups who've come to us haven't, without experience of delivering renewables projects in the past, they haven't had the knowledge or expertise to narrow their request, narrow their bid to a certain technology. So working with ourselves, working with Locogen, we've encouraged groups to be open, to say, it's absolutely okay to say that, there might be 4 or 5 different technologies that you want to consider, and you want the evidence to see what might work and what might not work, rather than narrowing yourself at that pre-bid stage. Okay, thanks, Kate. So, Rsf successes today. Well, the big success of the programme for us has been those 33 groups that we've supported, 30 of which have never delivered a renewables project before. And we're really proud about that. We're really, if we go back 2 years, we really didn't know how much interest and enthusiasm there was going to be for this fund. And it's been fantastic for us to see so many groups come forward, willing to learn all those lessons, engaging with their communities, really, embracing the opportunity that the fund gave them. And yeah, it's been really fantastic. And if we think back to that map that we looked at a couple of minutes ago, and that big gap in the top right-hand side of the country, this is really an essential stage in us developing a functioning community energy sector in our area. So it's not sufficient, but it's absolutely essential in itself, and it's fantastic to see those groups start to come through. And I hope the groups who have gone through that process, have taken a minute to feel proud about the work that they've done. Another great success has been to see how groups have got involved in a wide variety of activities. Monkfryston have secured grants to install solar PV. They also secured a thermal imaging camera. I still don't quite know how they managed that, but they did do that, and the work that they did with that imaging camera then led to another fund to support some energy efficiency work that they did in their community centre. We've got a group in Aspirations who got involved in fuel poverty advice and educational work, and also work with 3 local schools on a public sector decarbonisation fund. We've got a group in Humshoff who have worked with other local villages to make sure that the learning they're doing through Rsf is shared with other local villages. A group in Haltwhistle who are working with their local authority to look at other projects which they could potentially develop. So lots of groups being flexible and taking this fund and taking these opportunities in positive and maybe unexpected directions, which has been lovely to see. Next point, 4 stage 2 projects. Oh, sorry, Kai. I was just on the next stage. 4 stage 2 projects have been supported to date. 2 of those have gone through the process of stage 1 support, feasibility work, comes out positively, then move on to stage 2. Another 2 projects have done that feasibility work through other funding routes and have come straight in at stage 2, at the stage 2 stage. So the projects that we've funded to date, we've got a solar project that focuses on schools, which has actually been developed by Energise Barnsley, who are one of our leading lights in community energy. But they've managed to develop a project that focused exclusively on rural schools, and through ensuring that the benefits of that project were delivered to those rural areas, the project did meet the Rsf requirements. And so that was good to see. Obviously, solar on schools, a tried and tested route, but an underdeveloped route in our area. With a group in Durham Villages that focused on a ground-mounted project that looks really promising, and they're new to the sector, so that's fantastic to see that project move forward. We have a heat network project in Bishop Auckland, so obviously trying to put together those complex mix of factors that lead to a successful heat network project. And lastly, we've got a project, Anaerobic Digestion project, based in Malton. And this is a really interesting project to me. I'm not sure. I know Sue's on the meeting. I know she's posted a message saying she was going to drop off for a little while, so I'm not sure if she's on right at this moment. But in Circular Malton, we've got a project there based on AD, where there is local expertise. There's consultancies who focus on that area. There's expertise at the University of York. So locally, there's academic expertise. It's an area where the LEP is very active. There's a lot of local activism in that area on the back of an anti-fracking movement that's then developed in different directions. And at the heart of it, you've got a fantastic group who work closely with the local LEP and really good links with the local business and voluntary communities. So to me, almost that's a little example of a micro example of a functioning community energy sector focused on that specific AD type area. So that hopefully that's a little bit of a sign of where we want to get to across the area and across a whole range of technologies. And I think as well, those 4 stage 2 projects, obviously we're delighted to have supported those, but in a way they also flag the big challenges around the project and around delivery. We've supported 31 stage 1 projects. If more funding is available, we'll certainly see more of those transfer into stage 2s, but we don't know at this stage just how many. And obviously moving those projects from feasibility to delivery is really challenging. There's no doubt about it. And we will just continue to work closely with the groups and try and signpost the positive directions as far as we possibly can. Okay, thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, this last slide here. So the areas that we want to build on, if more funding was available, we'll do a full evaluation of the project to date, of the programme to date, to unpick the lessons. We will look to consider a range of tools to help assess viability. We're looking at some software tools that do that for existing buildings. We'd like to look at whether that was possible for community energy projects. We need to strengthen the relationship with MPG. We've got a good relationship with them, but we need to take advantage of that better. Build strong networks around projects. Kate mentioned those critical local authority links. We need to build those in at the earliest possible stage. Work closely with other energy hubs. We do that. We need to do more of it. We need to do more share and learning. Like I say, we've got strong relations. We need to take advantage of that as much as we can. And yet the last point was just around trying to be flexible in terms of how we bring the expertise in and develop those community projects. So I rattle through it. I think I'm a slightly over time. And
just a wee bit, but you're okay.
Great. Okay, so that's me. So I'll hand back to whistle stop tour. I'll hand back to Jodie.
Thanks, Alan. That was a really useful run through. It's great to hear you highlighting some of the key things that Kate and I have been trying to draw on, which is that collaboration aspect being so vital, and really nice to hear about some of those projects in the region as well. Hopefully we'll be hearing more from those groups in the future on forums like this. Today we've tried to draw experience from across the UK, and I think particularly it'd be really nice to be hearing from some of those projects at our forums with Northern Powergrid in the not too distant future. I'm going to go straight over to Jack.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Aware that we want to move on to the question and answers as soon as possible, so I'll try and condense mine down a little bit as well. So if we just want to go on to the next slide. So brief introduction to the Midlands Energy Hub. We don't have a shiny slide with our areas on, so I'm going to try and do mine from memory now. So we have Greater Lincolnshire, Leicester and Leicestershire, D2N2, which is Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. We then have Coventry and Warwickshire, Stoke and Staffordshire, Birmingham and Solihull, Black Country, which is Wolverhampton, Walsall areas. Then we have Worcestershire, and then we have the Marches LEP, which is Herefordshire and Gloucestershire. I've got those around the wrong way. That's our map of Midlands Energy Hub. So we have a Rural Community Energy Project Officer who would normally be running these things, but she's actually off this week, so I'm stepping in. I'm actually the regional officer for Greater Lincolnshire. We also have an officer in each of those regions across the country who kind of help with the Rural Community Energy Fund, as well as helping with the community officer. So next slide. So quick, Alan's already touched on most of this already, but there's just a bit of background there around the Rural Community Energy Fund. Stage 1's up to £40,000 for business study, for feasibility studies. Stage 2 is £100,000 for business development and planning, and all of the complicated stuff which comes after a feasibility study before you actually get to the point of we need capital cost and capital money to invest into this project to get it going. So we've had 21 projects which have been funded so far. That's split between 1 and 2. And there's just a bit of information there around the type of organisations which can apply for the fund. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go through 3 quick examples of different types of community projects which we've had within the Midlands region, just to give you a bit of a taste of what's worked. And then at the end, I'll go through some things which aren't great as well, because you need to know some pitfalls not to go into. So the first one here is Positive Activities. That's based just outside of Grimsby. The initial feasibility for that was signed off back in 2019. That was looking at anaerobic digestion and how to utilise feedstock and what to do with anaerobic digestion on their site. The overall project aim for that site is to create a hub which is a place where visitors can come and learn about different types of renewable energy, how that can link in with the community, and just really kind of utilise all of that to also feed into their charitable work as well, because Positive Activities are a charity. Next slide, please. Belp Clusters is a community-led historical charity looking at EV charging on a World Heritage site. They had a lot of willingness within the community already, looking at EV technology and an EV charging scheme. So that was looking at an innovative way to utilise the site that they were on and the community that they had, but using known technologies for EV charging. That report hasn't been finished yet. So next slide, please. So this is Framland Sustainable Churches. This was a deanery in North Leicestershire that wanted to develop practical solutions to help decarbonise the churches. It was utilising existing research which had been done all up and down the country. And the idea was to create a guide which meant that anybody from a church, a single church right the way up to a deanery, a collection of churches, would be able to go in and look at a church and figure out what ways to decarbonise that church. So that was granted back in 2019 and the report has been completed, and we're glad to say that it's not only is it being used by Framland, but it's also being used by churches up and down the region as well to try and look at how to decarbonise that moving forward. Just next slide, please. So go through a couple of common mistakes. This is the interesting things. This is things to really try and avoid. So if you've got a lack of community interest or benefit, then you're really going to struggle right from the beginning. You need that community tie, and there needs to be some interest there from the community, and there needs to be a clear community benefit as well. It's all well and good that you've got community interest, but if the benefit is not going into the community, you unfortunately won't be successful with the fund. As well as that, we know it's difficult, but if you can pull out some proper costings to look at a breakdown on how the money is going to be spent. We're not expecting a full financial model. We completely appreciate your either volunteers or community groups. You're not going to have an economics professor as part of your board to pull these together. But if you can complete some soft market testing just to get an idea around what the costs are going to be and how that's going to work, that'd be great. I know it's been mentioned a couple of times already, but governance, if you've got a poor structure or an over-reliance on one key volunteer, it's difficult. You need more people there, either paid people or bringing together a collection of volunteers who are all able to take on some of that work and share the project ideals. You will go far. Finally, and probably most important, is just trying to have a clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve. Having a clear goal that you're moving towards is paramount, because otherwise you can end up doing lots of different things and lots of different areas which aren't pulling towards the same thing, and you can end up losing what you're trying to achieve. Most of all, though, is speak to us, speak to your energy hubs. We're here, we're trying to help. We want to get these projects up and running. And even if we either don't have the expertise to help, we will try and find a link into somebody who does. So yeah, that's a very, very quick tour. Hopefully I made up a bit of time, but yeah, there we go. And my details are there. So if you need anything else, please do feel free to drop me a line.
Thanks, Jack and Alan. So if you can both post your details in the chat as well, so anyone can contact you, that would be really brilliant. How to get in touch about those regional energy hub and rural community energy funds. Really great to hear some of those lessons on, you know, having a clear goal being essential, not trying to do everything. It's really tempting to do that as a community because you think about things very holistically, but be focused on that thing that you're trying to achieve, and make sure that everyone in your group is really on board with that. You know, when I've been helping community energy entities set up, we spent a lot of time on kind of visioning and what we're there to achieve, because everyone even on our board has different ideas about what we're trying to do. And you're only really going to achieve what you want to achieve if you're very much pulling together as a team and working together as a team. That community engagement being essential, you know, that's not just because that's a requirement of the Rural Community Energy Fund. It's really about making sure that your project is supported in the long run, and that's not just from a financial perspective, but from a time and volunteer perspective, and a sort of general sense of goodwill towards what you're doing. You want people in your community to like what you're doing and be supportive of it. You know, it's really tiring having people who don't agree with you, but that is going to happen. And how can you make sure that everyone really understands what you're doing, and communicating what you're doing really effectively is essential. And that comes back to that kind of networking with everyone, back to Kate's point of you don't know what you don't know. So make sure you use opportunities like this to network. And hopefully in the future, when we can actually meet in person, we'll be able to start building more of that network in this region. You know, the regional energy hubs can help with that. Northern Powergrid can definitely help with that through forums like this. And those forums have been established in other parts of the country. There's no reason why this can't happen where you are as well.